All done. All silent. Going. Gone. So congratulations.
Welcome to the Current Market Insights podcast, brought to you by Harris Partners Real Estate. Each episode, we chat with real estate author and industry leader Peter O'Malley to discuss the current property market conditions and provide insights to assist you on your property journey.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Current Market Insights. I'm your host, Kieran O'Brien, and with me as always is my good friend, Mr. Peter O'Malley. Peter, hello.
Hi, Kieran. Great to see you.
Great to see you, Peter. It has been a few weeks since we had a chat, and I'm really excited to get back into the studio. I don't know about yourself, but it feels unusual not catching up with you as we always do.
Yeah, great. There's much to discuss, eh?
There certainly is. Let's jump right in tonight. I was going back through, as I often do, some of your earlier works. You know, as our listeners will know, you've written quite a lot in real estate and you've got a lot of experience and insight. And one of the things that caught my eye a little while ago, and I thought we could talk about tonight, is this idea of the phantom buyer. You, in one of your earliest books, you talk about phantom buyers and their presence in the marketplace and the role that they may play. So I thought tonight we might have a bit of a discussion through the phantom buyer, what they are, how you might be able to spot one if you are a buyer in the market, what kind of questions you could ask to potentially flesh out if you are being played in this, and also get a bit of a sense of what the what the rules and the regulations are around this, because I imagine it is a bit of a frosty area for people.
Kieran, a phantom buyer is essentially the equivalent of a dummy buyer, but in a negotiation sense rather than a public open auction sense. So it's very hard to have a phantom buyer at a public auction because everything's transparent and there to be seen. And that's where in days gone past, less so at the moment, that agents, as we know, would plant dummy bidders. What is very common in the real estate market is agents who will overstate the interest levels, the determination and the capability of competing buyers to secure a subject property. And they do that as leverage to move the buyer along that they're talking to. So at its worst, the phantom buyer is someone who doesn't exist, and the agent just recklessly says, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, I need you to make an offer on this property today because I've got another buyer who wants to make a higher offer than what you've already given me, and I'm going to sell it to them if you don't make a superior offer. Now, to make such an outlandish claim if you genuinely don't have another buyer is completely reckless and will see you fall flat on your face as a real estate agent pretty quickly. But it does happen because buyers tell us that it happens. But what we do see most commonly, and what people listening to this podcast will identify with, is agents who do have some competing interest in the subject property, but they overstate, embellish as a way of creating leverage on behalf of their vendor.
Okay, so the scenario goes, we've got a couple of parties who may have come through, they may have requested documents, they're showing some interest, but in order to, are you suggesting that the tactic is used more to, promote people to the offer stage, or is it used to really increase offers for people that may have already made interest in the...
All of the above, Kieran. It's designed, the competing buyer or the phantom buyer is designed to move the buyer to the next stage or rule them out of process. So you might have had 2 inspections, but not made an offer. So I might say, Kieran, we do have another buyer interested in the property. They have made an offer. You've had 2 inspections. You've downloaded the contract, but you haven't made an offer. Should I let you know if I sell the property, or is this not of interest to you anymore?
Okay, so when I am cruising about on a Saturday and I get a text message from Agent X over in whatever suburb that says, hey, we've received multiple offers on this property at this price, are you still interested? Would I rightly assume that those offers do exist, or do you think it's fair to say that a good percentage of this kind of advertising, as you like, is perhaps just phantom?
Look, that's a great question. I think if an agent goes on the record and puts something in writing en masse, the chances of there actually being another buyer are pretty high.
Okay.
It's the buyer who's making fairly aggressive verbal claims but won't actually follow through and put it in writing or text message that, yes, there are other buyers interested in the property. We're moving forward with those buyers in the absence of any superior bids.
Okay, so if in your experience, if an agent is employing this tactic, do you think they are just in many ways creating this bid on behalf? Is it a true Fanta bid in the sense that there is actually no buyer with any interest at that level, or do you think they're taking some of those verbals? Oh, mate, I'd give you $1 million for this kind of thing, and then putting that out there to the other buyers to say, well, look, we have interest at $1 million. You need to act to purchase.
That's right. A real estate agent can claim that a verbal offer is indeed an offer,
right?
Where I'd contest that it's not. It's a pipe dream. It's just blowing in the wind. But a real estate agent can say, look, I have had an offer for $1 million, or they may not disclose the figure. They may disclose the figure. But we have had an offer from another party on the property, and we're in continuing negotiations with that party. The vision that you might have if you're interested in that property, someone signed a contract at $1 million and submitted it to the owner, and the owner's just pondering whether to accept it or negotiate further or outright reject it. When indeed it might be a buyer who's just walked through the open house one Saturday and said, this is a nice place, I'd give you $1 million. If it doesn't go any higher than that, give me a call. Is that an offer? It's questionable, but the agent may use that verbal offer to their advantage with other parties.
Okay. So if I am a buyer and I am interested in the property and the agent is pressuring me, because that's what this is, it's a pressure tactic really, what kind of things can I do to try and tease out whether there actually is another offer there?
I think you've got to run your own race, and that's a great question because buyers get caught up on worrying about what competing buyers might be doing for the subject property, Kieran. I think you need to understand what the property is worth to you, what it represents to you, what you're prepared to pay for it. And if you really want to go for the subject property, follow the agent's advice as far as process of making an offer in terms of signing a contract and submitting it to the owner for their consideration. I'm not suggesting for one moment that you go above the budget for the property if the agent encourages you to do so. It's more about making the offer that you are prepared to make in the strongest and most compelling format for the owner to consider.
Okay, so it ties into advice we've given on the podcast before, which is that buyers take steps to buy. And really, you shouldn't worry too much about the collateral or the peripheral noise. You should just focus on working with your conveyancer, working with your broker or whoever it might be, and working with that selling agent to make sure that you can put your best foot forward when it comes to trying to purchase.
That's right. And you need to ensure that you're not hoodwinked by an underquote. So you may see $1 million property advertised for $850,000 and you think that you've stumbled on the bargain of a lifetime. And even if it only goes up 10%, it's still a bargain at that level. The reality is that if you advertise $1 million property for $850,000, do you know what it ends up selling for, Kieran?
Oh, it goes for 1.25?
Well, it goes for $1 million because that's what it's worth. So the whole thing about underquoting is it gives you the illusion that it goes above market price, but it doesn't. It reverts back to the mean. It reverts back roughly, give or take, to the fundamental value of the property.
Yeah, exactly. So sort of shifting a little bit then, we know we've spoken ad infinitum about underquoting and what a scourge it is in the industry. You've given another example there. We've talked about this pressure tactic from agents to use things like a phantom buyer. Is there any legislation in place to protect people against this? Is this one of those things that Fair Trading say, well, don't do it, but we're also not going to do anything about it?
Well, look, I've looked at the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission website, the ACCC, and in regards to real estate agents, they say quite clearly, it's illegal for real estate agents to mislead consumers about a property's price or any other information about that property. And secondly, is that real estate agents must not mislead consumers in order to encourage higher offers. And there's a very high profile case in Melbourne about 7 or 8 years ago where the real estate agent flat out invented another offer. It was a total phantom buyer scenario. The buyer got wind that the competitive bidding that they thought they were in was actually a one-horse race and they overpaid for it. And the amount that they overpaid for it by being talked up by the real estate agent thinking they were in competition with a fictitious buyer, they successfully sued the agent for their money back.
Yeah, wow.
And it was I think it was around 350,000. I tried to find it on the internet this afternoon to reference it here, but it's not showing up. But the real estate agent got absolutely cleaned up through the courts by a consumer who was not prepared to have any of that.
So just to clarify from your memory, the 350,000 or whatever it ends up being, was that the property cost, or that was just the that was the damages? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow, okay. So at least we know, maybe the skeptic in me says at least Victoria's a little better at protecting consumers when it comes to real estate. I'm not sure.
I don't think that was a state-based outcome. That was just a consumer that was not prepared. They were able to get the evidence to show that the real estate agent fictitiously created another buyer, and B, the party who successfully sued were able to demonstrate how much unnecessarily they increased their offer, believing they were in a competitive situation. And in one sense, the real estate agent who was sued in that instance is highly unlucky, because that goes on across the real estate industry across the country every second weekend. So it is a game of bluff when we get to the negotiation table, and there's two ways that an agent can bluff, and one of them is highly misleading, and the other is to overstate, embellish, use superficial interest to their absolute advantage, but to completely invent a buyer that does not exist as a way of creating a competing situation with a genuine buyer at the table is reckless, and if you get found out, you're in big trouble.
Oh, well, there's, as you articulate, there's a massive difference between someone who can negotiate and someone who is a grifter. And one of them is legal, one isn't. One's highly valued, one isn't.
It's a very thin line, though.
Oh, look, it is. I think good negotiators, in many ways, it's I said about a whole range of things, but I think someone who can negotiate as an art form, it's almost like magic. They can tease things out of you didn't realise that you were prepared to do.
It is one of the reasons that agents love to underquote, though, because it gives them multiple buyers all thinking they're going to buy the subject property for below market price. And the response to a low offer is, look, it's a fair and reasonable offer. It's just that I've got another two parties that have offered more. And that's probably telling the truth. And where all of that started from is the agent has quoted 15 or 20% below the true market price to create that fictitious competition.
Yeah, I'm actually really glad you sort of summarised with that point, because in your article you also talk about the phantom buyer being used the other way. So you talk about, obviously we've covered, phantom buyers as a way of promoting competition. But you also talk about the use of a phantom buyer by an agent to then condition a seller to come down. They say, look, we've had X amount of people through, we've got 5 offers and they're all at 900,000. I know you wanted $1 million, but this is what the market says, so we need to adjust and rethink. Do you think that is as common now, perhaps with the underquoting?
More so, Kieran. Yeah.
Okay.
So as I say, agents completely and utterly inventing a buyer or placing a dummy bidder at an auction has been replaced by underquoting. And then the underquoting creates the multiple buyer scenario that the agent uses to their advantage, and they might overstate the depth of interest of the buyer. But whenever we go into another agent's failed campaign and we say, what offers have you had? If we see email offers or the owner says, I was furnished with a contract offer, we accept that the previous real estate agent did furnish them with offers that the owner wisely or unwisely declined. But wherever they said, well, no, he never actually gave us anything in writing, he just said that Joe Bloggs was prepared to pay $1 million and would we accept that? And we said, no, we wouldn't accept $1 million. Our reserve's 1.1. And what I say to those crestfallen vendors at that stage is the agent didn't really have a buyer. They're exploring your bottom line with the phantom buyer. And it's one of the most seductive conditioning techniques that some agents will use just to see if they can reset the vendor's price expectations. Because I was in a scenario the other week where the real estate agent told the vendor $4 million and the market feedback is low threes. So the agent was somewhere, 20%.
Well, maybe 30%.
Maybe 30%, but certainly 20% overpriced. Don't worry about underquoting, overpriced in what they told the vendor versus what the market was telling the real estate agent. So in that instance, instead of saying, look, I've overpriced your house by 20%, they say, I love your house. I think your house is worth $4 million, but all I've got here is Mr. O'Brien, who said he's prepared to offer 3.1. What do you want me to do with that?
Yeah, exactly. And I can see, particularly at the lower scale, lower end of the market, where you might have multiple first home buyers thinking, hey, we can enter the market in Rozelle for 800,000, coming and putting forward offers immediately. You know, here's my contract, bang, we're ready to go. And the agent knows full well that the house is worth at least 1.1, for example. They could then, you know, quite reasonably put forward all these offers to the owner and say, look, this is where all the market feedback is.
Yeah, I like your property, but this is what the market's telling me.
Yeah, knowing full well that the real offer's, you know, a week away when the buyers have actually had the time to come through. I think it's disheartening. Certainly whenever we talk about this topic, I get disheartened as someone who's in the industry, but also as someone who's, you know, enjoys the property market. It is really frustrating to hear about some of the tactics used. I think this topic is, for me, particularly important because it really does affect both sides of a transaction. And in many ways, there are some agents that could use it in the same transaction on both sides quite easily.
Indeed. And look, as a prospective purchaser, you should be very wary of a real estate agent that won't state in writing, whether it's text message or email, that there's multiple genuine buyers and capable buyers trying to buy the property at that time. Equally, as a vendor who's on the market and agents are throwing at you what appear to be offers, if none of those offers appear in writing in a formal sense, you must really question the legitimacy of those offers and ask yourself, am I undergoing a conditioning process from the real estate agent here?
Yeah, okay. That kind of, to me, is really interesting. A couple of years ago, I had a buyer ask me, you know, she had purchased a property from me, and then after the contracts were signed, actually said, hey, look, you mentioned there was another buyer throughout the campaign. Can you prove that? And I did.
I remember this.
I redacted the documents and I showed her, you know, without giving away identifying information, that, look, there was a very genuine offer not far from yours, hence the conversation we had. I wonder, I was very happy to do that because, you know, I'm an ethical guy and I'd operated ethically, so I had the evidence there. But I wonder, as a buyer, would it be reasonable in the scenario you just outlined where an agent's saying, look, there are multiple offers, but they're potentially not committing too much in writing to back that up? Am I within my rights, do you think, to say to the agent, well, look, we are interested, but can you show me some evidence of these other buyers?
I think strident buyers will do that. Yeah, and I remember the lady who did that to you after the fact, once we exchanged contracts, of course. But if you were unable to verify the fact that you did genuinely have other buyers in that property, you had a problem.
Oh, of course. I mean,
because she was not mucking around. She wanted firm evidence that you got her to the price, you got her the sale price to the level that you did, based on the fact that she was in a competitive scenario. And let's face it, there was a bit of buyer's remorse because it was a strong market and she had to pay a big price to secure the subject property. And I was like, hey, I've only gone to this number because Kieran's had me believe that I'm in a hyper-competitive situation. Kieran proved that I was in a hyper-competitive situation, and you never need to fear being investigated when you tell the truth. And, you showed her enough at that time to put yourself in the clear. But as a buyer, don't be afraid to ask the tough questions. The stakes are high. You're investing in most cases, for most people, a majority of your wealth.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I think in Sydney property, definitely. Interestingly, in that case, I do remember she mentioned that pressure had come from her solicitor. And obviously that's a solicitor who's looking out for their client. That's great, well-being. I really, again, I was never upset in that process. It was just, it caught me by surprise because I had never been asked before so bluntly.
But see, you're caught by surprise because you'd never been asked, but you weren't upset because you understood where they were coming from and you had nothing to fear.
Yeah, of course. I guess my final question on the topic then, Peter, tying into you sort of saying buyers don't be afraid to be upfront and ask for proof. Given that agents have this fiduciary responsibility, this obligation to tell the truth when asked questions about a property, are they required to answer your question?
Let's go back to the ACCC. They say real estate agents must not mislead consumers in order to encourage higher offers. You cannot use a dummy bidder of any description or a phantom buyer to get a financial advantage. So when we say the real estate agent has a fiduciary duty to the vendor, what that means is the agent has to get the best possible price and terms for their vendor by using fair and legal means.
Yeah.
And overstating a phantom buyer's interest in a property as a way of driving the sale price up for the vendor is not what falls under fiduciary duty. That falls under a form of fraud or totally misleading people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's. I accept the legislation. I accept that agents have a responsibility, but I wonder, again, I'm being a little bit cynical, but I wonder how many agents, if you ask them flat out, well, look, I appreciate what you're telling me, but prove it. How many would actually come to the party, or how many might just block my number on their CRM and move on?
Well, look, that comes down to market conditions. In a strong market, the agent's probably got multiple buyers, so they can demonstrate that there is genuinely competing interest in the subject property. In a weak market, the agent can block your number as a way of not being open to scrutiny, but next week on a different property, they're going to need you because in a weak market, one of the symptoms is there's more sellers than buyers. So power is perception in a negotiation, and as a home buyer, you cannot allow yourself to be bullied and bluffed out in the field. You have to stand up for yourself. And a lot of people can't handle the law of the jungle when it comes to how the real estate market operates in Sydney, and I accept that. And that's why you've seen the explosion in buyer's agents, because the whole thing looks like a zoo with unlocked cages.
Yeah, look, I'm glad we're going to finish on that point, because I see a lot of online discourse around why do we still need real estate agents, but this is a prime example of why. You need people who know how to navigate these scenarios, who have seen it all before, and who can cut through the crap, for lack of a better word, and get straight down to negotiating on the property that you're after.
I'll often say when I'm helping someone purchase a property through another agent, just tell me what you've been told and I'll repeat back to you what's really happening. And when you've been in the industry for long enough, you've heard all the lines, you've heard all the jargon, you've seen all the moves, and within reason, you've pretty much seen it all, and you know exactly where the agent's going, even if they don't.
Yeah, really good summary today, Peter, and I hope that our listeners find that we've simplified this enough that they can use this advice moving forward. As always, Peter, I thank you for coming on and talking about a really good topic.
Thanks, Kieran. All the best.
And thanks to everyone for listening. I will do my best to put the link to that article Peter references in the description for today's podcast. And as always, thanks for joining us on Current Market Insights. We look forward to speaking with you next time.
Thanks for joining us on the Current Market Insights podcast, brought to you by Harris Partners Real Estate. The podcast providing real estate insights you won't find anywhere else.